You guys too? So no, said fifth grade me to 1950s dress-up day. But, you know, Hegel talks about the cunning of history. The cunning of history is that the thing you try to avoid still comes back behind your back, as it were. Because what did our classroom look like in fifth grade in the Brockport school system on that 1950s day in 1970? Oh, lots of white kids. You could tell because the school had a swimming pool and a student parking lot and tennis courts and trips to the Toronto Science Museum and trips to Washington, D.C. And they even let us practice with weapons. We had an archery class. So we had laser beams. We had all that stuff. So you know there are not many Black people in it. I'm in it because, I don't know, my parents missed a turn somewhere between childhood in Jamaica, Puerto Rico, Tanzania, and Libya. My parents took a weird turn, and it's upstate New York. Like, really? All those wonderful warm climates. This is how it works, Mom and Dad. Oh, and by the way, they're having 50s day at school. So thank you for that. So it's always dangerous for me to turn to the past, but I can talk about fifth grade endlessly. The cunning of history is such that it looks like the 1950s anyway. One Black kid sitting there like this, angry, sad, we can't tell, it's puzzling, alienated by himself. Everyone else we're having a fantastic time. Like this is like the greatest thing ever. I don't know why he's not participating. Why do they segregate themselves like that? Why are all the Black kids sitting alone? Sorry, why is the Black kid sitting alone? I'm not sitting next to him. Are you gonna sit next to him? No, he didn't even like 50s day. So it takes a lot to actually stand up for yourself, to remember that you have parents, and they had parents, and they had grandparents, and they didn't go through what they went through for you to play the fool in the 1950s day in fifth grade, or to play the fool in law school, imagining that these founding fathers were anything but your murderers. People who had murdered you, people who didn't want you to survive. James Baldwin, on the eve of the 100th anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, wrote a letter to his nephew, telling his nephew that things are changing. I wish they'd changed, because then in the 1970s, I wouldn't have had to fight a lone fifth grade fight against 1950s day. But James Baldwin tells his nephew that things are changing. People aren't standing for it anymore. People of color around the world are on the move. And this is going to shatter the reality of white America, because our place on the bottom has always functioned for them as a fixed star, as a North Star, pun intended, as a North Star in their navigation of the world. And if that changes, people literally go insane. You've seen people go insane, haven't you? Define woman. Remember that idiot? Which idiot was it? Say his name. All of them. Front of the class. I don't know you, but front of the class. Well, a lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite. You're either working to break this system down, or you're working for the parasites who love that founding moment and talk about it endlessly. Who want it to endlessly repeat in the form of stare decisis, who tell you that the system can change things from within, as if pressure from within isn't a designed-in feature of the machine. How is it a designed-in feature of the machine? You know, we get together at events like this, or one day we'll get together maybe to have some legislative act, or some executive order, or some win in the courtroom, some pretty painting of the future, painted in words that will always contain gaps. I hate myself when I make noises like that. I like narrate my own life. I imagine a word balloon and I write in it. So paint a pretty picture of an egalitarian tomorrow, painted in fantastic words. The words will always contain gaps, conflicts, and ambiguities. We are not the power, or we wouldn't have had to, on bended knee, pray for legal relief for this or that outrage. We're not the interpreters. Someone else is interpreting it, and that someone else hates us, or we wouldn't have been in the discriminated against situation. So the gaps, conflicts, and ambiguities in the new dispensation that everybody cheers about are going to be interpreted against us each time. Remember the bloodbath at the beginning? Slavery, colonialism, and genocide? It happens at every moment, right? Poverty is a bloodbath. Who lives close to the knives? We do. That's what brings us here together, because we understand that no one should be living close to the knives. There shouldn't be knives. This is a social system. Sharp objects aren't the way to take care of each other. If it were only up to us, and you can look at the 538 polling, the United States would be a hyper-democratic social welfare state like Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Iceland, Finland, with a government that had an ethic of cradle to grave care for all of its citizens. And we would have a better immigration policy than those countries do. We would have open borders. When they polled African Americans about the wall, we said, don't build the wall. Frederick Douglass was against borders. We should knock them all down. There's no reason, if you're born in one place, that you shouldn't be able to go to another place and enjoy all of the things people in that other place enjoy. Who set up these nation states that had rules against regular people that lived in them? The hoarders of all of this wealth. So, I'm just going to do a cool helter-skelter thing, but that doesn't mean anything to you guys, does it? But the way this legal reform works, when I get to the bottom, I go back to the top of the slide where I stop and I turn and I go for a ride till I get to the bottom when I see you again. And if I were the Beatles, I would say, yeah, 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 yeah. And you guys would all know it and feel it in your souls. Ask your grandparents, they remember the Beatles. I'm not as old as your grandparents, not yet. I will be one day, but that hasn't happened yet. So we want to get off this crazy ride. We can fight for things within the system, and that's great. It's like when you're in the labor movement and you fight for better hours, wages, and working conditions. But you lose if you forget that it is in fact the entire system of hoarding, of owning means of production that needs to be overcome. If it's great to advocate for prison reform, welfare reform, all kinds of reforms, but unless you get rid of immense hoarding of wealth, unless you get rid of prisons altogether, then we are going to be the ones who are marked for less, because that's how we were marked at that initial moment that gave rise to the legal machinery that we're all in and now studying: slavery, colonialism, genocide. It's a fantastic week with Ketanji Brown Jackson being confirmed. That's the sunny side, but that's not. That's all positive. That's not where I live. I'm in that 5th grade. That's within the event horizon of that 5th grade singularity that got a grip on me. And so within that event horizon, Farley in 5th grade, taking the wrong turn from all those wonderful warm countries to upstate New York. Always winter, never Christmas. See what I did there with that Narnian time? And then I felt a little proud of that just now. They tried, 47 of them, to scandalize her name. And they weren't just talking about her. They were talking about you and you and you and you and you and me and you and every single person in this room that believes himself or herself to be a social engineer instead of a parasite. They did it before when they called Sonia Sotomayor a wise Latina, as if that were a bad thing, because to them that is a bad thing, being a Latina and so wise, being a Black woman and so wise. None of you are supposed to be wise. You're not supposed to get wise to the secrets of their hoarding and the way they'll push the violence of the past forever into the future until we negotiating here and there within the machine, realized that our actual mission as social engineers and not parasites is to undo the machine altogether. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Farley, for that powerful message. Can we give Professor Farley another round of applause? Wow. Amidst our technical difficulties, which we dearly apologize, Oli and I would like to formally introduce ourselves to you guys. My name is Brenda Gonzalez. I am a 1L. I am originally from California, and I hope to become a judge one day. And I also aspire to become an immigration attorney. Also, maybe a combination of criminal and immigration, so that'd be crimmigration. Yes, these are my aspirations for the future.
Hello, everyone. My name is Olimata Jobe. I am a 2L at our school. I'm interested in real estate, law, property law, and land use. So next, we introduce our outstanding panelists. Please hold your round of applause until we finish introducing all of our panelists, though.
First, I'd like to introduce the Honorable Daniel Flores, who is joining us via Zoom from San Francisco, California. Judge Flores graduated from McGeorge Law School in 2001 and is a judge of the Superior Court of San Francisco County, and he handles juvenile justice cases. He also serves as the presiding judge of the San Francisco Superior Court's Appellate Division. Before he was a judge, Judge Flores served his community and his country as a Marine in the United States Marine Corps Reserves. Upon completion of his initial military training, he enrolled at CSU Sacramento and obtained a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. From there, he enrolled in McGeorge Law School and earned his Juris Doctor. He began his legal career as a civil litigation attorney with the law firm of Ropers, Majeski, Kahn, and Bentley. And in 2005, he opened his own practice and continued to practice until he was sworn in as a judge in 2014.
Next, we have the Honorable Christina Ryba. Judge Ryba graduated from Albany Law School in 2001. Judge Ryba was elected by the people in the 3rd Judicial District to serve as Justice of the Supreme Court of New York State in 2015. Prior to beginning her term in 2016, she held various positions in the court system for the Office of Court Administration and in the New York State Supreme Court 3rd Department Appellate Division, including Special Projects Counsel to the Deputy Chief Administrative Judge for courts outside New York City, and Special Projects Counsel to the Presiding Justice of the Appellate Division, 3rd Department. Before working with the judiciary, Judge Ryba was an associate at Nixon Peabody, where she practiced labor and employment law and commercial litigation.
Next, we have the Honorable Richard Rivera. Judge Rivera graduated from Albany Law School in 1986. Judge Rivera was first elected to a 10-year term in the Albany County Family Court in November of 2014. Judge Rivera was appointed to preside over the newly created domestic violence part at the Albany County Family Courts. Judge Rivera presides over the Albany County Youth part since its creation in 2018, pursuant to the Raise the Age legislation. Effective January 1st, 2019, Judge Rivera was designated acting Supreme Court Justice for the 3rd Judicial District and was named as the first supervising judge for domestic violence courts and mentor courts in the district.
And next we have Professor of Law, Ciji Dodds. Professor Dodds graduated from Howard Law School in 2009. She is a professor of law at Albany Law School, where she teaches Introduction to Lawyering, Race and the Law, and Introduction to Critical Race Theory. Her research and teaching interests include gender and the law, feminist legal theory, peace studies, race and the law, critical race theory, immigration law, contracts, and legal writing. Professor Dodds is the co-founder and co-director of the Institute for Racial Justice Research and Advocacy. She is a member of the executive committees for the American Association of Law Schools Civil Rights Section, Minority Group Section, and of 2013, 40 and 40, Rising Latino Stars by the Hispanic Coalition in New York. She also runs her own legal practice located in Amsterdam, New York, providing legal consultations and representations in the areas of immigration law, bankruptcy law, and child welfare cases. Please help us welcome our amazing panelists. Now we begin our panel discussion. We will ask 3 questions and then give panelists an opportunity to respond. Lastly, we will open up the floor to the audience for Q&A.
So the first question will be for Judge Flores. Judge Flores, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Perfect. Okay, the question is, how has your cultural identity uniquely shaped your experience in academia and in the legal field?
Thank you. Thank you all for having me this evening. It's not quite evening in California. It's a nice sunny day. My cultural experience has definitely shaped every aspect of my becoming a lawyer, the choices of cases that I chose to focus on as an attorney and becoming a judge. At every step of the way, it was very obvious to me that the need for Latino representation, Spanish-speaking attorneys was very obvious. So to focus on the positive, it was very empowering to me to know that so many people of Spanish-speaking origin wanted an attorney that looked like me, that spoke their language, that had a cultural competency that would make them feel more comfortable. So from a success standpoint, a business standpoint, I felt that I would be effective not only having good legal training, but having that extra cultural competency that would help me better understand my client. Attorneys are servants. I mean, that's what we do. We serve the interests of other people as attorneys. So that I felt like gave me an added bonus to be able to present my cases in court, to negotiate with the other side in litigation, to really tell the story of the person or people that I was representing. On the not so negative, not so positive side, there were oftentimes things that I thought were tied into my cultural identity, such as, you know, the reception that I received from my college advisor when I first mentioned to him that I was interested in going to law school. He said, you know what, Danny, like people in law school are really refined. You know, you sure you want to do that? You know, my first reaction to that in my mind was, you know, this guy just called me ghetto, right? I mean, that's how I received that at the moment. I didn't ask many questions because frankly, I was shocked, and I was 21 at the time, talking to someone significantly older than me. The next interaction I had that I felt was similar was from another person in academia. Once I was accepted and got a scholarship, partial scholarship, but scholarship nonetheless. The reaction was, of course you did, you're Latino. I immediately felt like, you know, that undermined the work that I had put in, the value I might add, and what the law school might see in me in terms of adding value to their student environment. So those things I've always been able to balance, fortunately, with the positives, joining, you know, minority student groups, minority advancement programs, all the way since high school moving forward. and being able to surround myself with people, not only Latinos, African American, other persons of color from backgrounds that are not traditionally represented in the law, where I can see smart, intelligent people who are in the law for what the law is supposed to stand for. It's supposed to be there to provide justice for people. So all of that was empowering to me and to feel like I have an added bonus actually because of my background.
Great, thank you so much. Would anyone else like to respond to this question?
Would any panelists like to respond? That's
also students is something that we do often. I'll take a stab at it without giving too much away of my question and answer later. So much of me is wrapped up in my cultural identity. Being Puerto Rican, we're very loudly and flagrantly proud of who we are. And I can't help but let it permeate who I am. I consistently think I'm the best at what I do. I will wear my flag proudly, whether it be the Puerto Rican flag or my flag, the flag of my family and who I am. So it causes me to be loud. It causes me to be a little bit in people's faces and to never really take no for an answer.
Thank you.
So if I may.
Yes, please.
So I'm also Puerto Rican.
Hey.
And growing up at home, we were bilingual. And because we spoke English and a lot of our family members and friends did not, I was often put in a position where I had to speak on their behalf, call the power company, try to figure out why their power was cut, all those kinds of things that you need an interpreter for when you don't speak English. And I realized in my career that shaped who I am as an attorney and as a judge, because I'm constantly placed in that position where you're helping and you're forced to advocate for other people, which is what we as lawyers do. And so in that sense, my culture, my background, my heritage shaped a lot of who I am today as a judge and as a practicing attorney.
Thank you so much for that, Judge Rivera.
The next question will be for Judge Ryba. The question is, please describe your current job in detail and include the following in your response. Why you wanted to become the type of judge you are now, and a description of what your day-to-day tasks entail.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for including me on this panel. As background, when I was elected in 2015, I became the first person of color to ever be elected in 28 counties in the history of New York State. So it wasn't an easy journey. It was a tough election and I won, and it was humbling to be elected by a percentage of people. 85% of the constituents were white, and they selected me because of my experience and my temperament, and they wanted me to sit on the bench. And so I've been on the bench now for 6 years, and it's hard to believe how much time has gone by. But every day when I walk into work, the reason why I'm there is because I want to help people. And that's why I became a judge. I want to help people resolve their problems. And it's what I do as a Supreme Court judge in Albany County. Some particulars of what I do: I preside over matrimonial cases. I preside over medical malpractice, cases against the government, Article 78, mental hygiene hearings. It's across the board. And I not only preside over trials, but I write decisions. I help resolve cases with conferences. So every day is different. Right now I have Ollie as an intern in chambers, which is nice. I try to have an intern from Albany Law. I've had one almost every semester because I think it's important to other parts of the question. So I was elected. I work in Albany County, but it's a 7-county race. So I can pretty much preside over cases in Albany, Columbia, Greene, Rensselaer, Schoharie, Sullivan, and Ulster. That's my jurisdiction. We did have a second person of color elected this past cycle. So now there's 2 of us. He was elected in Ulster County. So that's exciting that we continue to see more diversity on the bench. And I think that's really a little bit, that's it. So.
Yes, thank you, Judge Ryba.
You're welcome.
Would any panelist like to respond to that question? So our next question is for Judge Rivera. The question is, consider your own law school experiences and early career experiences. What were important resources that helped you keep on your path to professional success?
For me, I have to say the resources were professors, fellow lawyers and judges, family, and most importantly, myself. So I want to correct something. I wasn't class of 1986 here at the law school. I was actually class of 91, but I was class of 86 from Colgate. I was going to say, boy, do I look that old? I'm only kidding. So when I graduated from Colgate, I came actually directly to Albany Law School, and I was originally class of 1989. So they weren't too far off. But when I got here, I got a nice little letter at the end of my first year saying, sorry, your GPA is not good enough. You cannot continue on with the class of 1989. If you want to come back as a freshman, you've got to apply and re-enroll and be considered. So I did that. They denied my application. I got a nice little letter saying, you can appeal this decision and we can still let you back in as a first year student. I appealed it. It was again denied. Got another letter that said, if you want to come back, wait a year and maybe we'll let you back in. So I was fortunate enough before I got that letter to have been accepted to a summer internship with the New York State Division of Housing and Community Renewal with their counsel's office. And at the time, and this is where the people come in, at the time, the general counsel of that office was someone that I will never forget and will eternally be grateful to, Linda Davis, who happens to be African-American, who was an alumni of this very law school. And so when I got the letter, it was when my internship was, it was during the summer when I was working there as an intern. I showed it to her and I was devastated because I was someone who skipped the 7th grade. I went to college at 16. I graduated when I was 20. I was on track to being a lawyer at 23. So I was devastated. This was a new experience for me. And I wanted to be a lawyer. That was my goal. So I remember talking to her and she said, well, first of all, the plan was for you to stay here through your sophomore year and work with our agency, but we can't keep you because this is a legal office and you are not a law student. So what she did was she said, well, let's find a way to help you. She had me draft a legal services contract, similar to being a paralegal, where I was going to continue to do research for the office, write memos and letters and all that kind of stuff to allow me to work for the entire year that I had to be out if I was going to go back to law school. I will never forget that for a lot of reasons. First of all, she didn't have to do that. Second of all, if she hadn't done that, I would have been out of work, probably would have had to have gone back home to the Bronx because I would have had no other options. And while I was there, because I started questioning whether or not this really was the career for me, I realized, I'm doing the work. I'm watching the attorneys in the office do the work. And I'm saying to myself, the only thing stopping me from doing what they're doing is law school. It actually cemented my desire to become an attorney. So that year later, I applied. I was accepted. I started as a freshman again, class of 91, and went from being at the bottom to being almost grading into a law review. And I thought, so fast forward a year, right? My complete difference, because I realized a whole lot of things about myself that I changed. But I got ready to apply for my first job and they asked for a transcript. I ordered it, and right there, smack dab in the front, right on the top, was that whole first year. And even though they had crossed off the grades, you could see it. It wasn't like they blacked it all out, right? You could see that I had been there and I got all these grades. And I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna apply for a job? And they're looking at this and they're gonna be like, what? And so I didn't know what to do. I went to the one professor who in this school I had developed a bond with because he was an alumni of Colgate University, where I went to undergrad. And I went to him, Professor Sproul, Howard Sproul. I said, Professor Sproul, I don't know what to do. And what he said to me is something I want to share with all of you, no matter what you go through. He said, first of all, that's what happened to you back then. That is not who you are. And it's certainly not who you are today. You have to come to terms with that, which is why I can share this with you. Be comfortable with that experience and be able to use it in a positive way. And you say to them, that's what happened. This is what I've done since then. That does not define me. It is not who I am. But you know, when you have a negative experience like that, it's very easy to succumb, to feel like, oh my God, I failed the bar. I failed it 3 times. What am I going to do? I can't tell anybody that I failed the bar. Let me tell you a secret. No one ever asks you when they want you to represent them. By the way, how many times did it take for you to pass the bar? And it's only large law firms that even want to know your transcript. Okay, most people don't care. They just want to know that you're licensed to practice law and that you're good at what you do. And so I realized then when he said that to me, you know, he's absolutely right. There's a big difference between what happened then and what's happening now. I felt comfortable with it, have no problem telling anyone and everyone who would ask what happened to me, because look at where I am now. It's about people, right? Sometimes from the unexpected people. And we often, especially as people of color, because of the stuff that we go through, don't find that person that we feel comfortable opening up to, because trust me, you often wonder, are they going to use it against me? And as judges, you can ask any judge, our lives can sometimes be very lonely because we can't make the kind of social connections that we used to be able to make, because it creates all kinds of conflicts then, right? We can't, they advise us not to be on Facebook because you might say something that could later be used against you in front of a commission and have you removed from the bench because you unintentionally spoke about a case that might be pending before you. And so it can be a very lonely existence. So you got to find that person, those people, those things that you can trust in, and look for that wisdom, that advice that you can get. That's why I say it was people, professors, lawyers, judges, and especially myself, because ultimately it comes down to you being comfortable with who you are, with your ability to do this thing, right, as we say, and to actually put it into practice. And I always say my personal motto is that I'm going to try my best to be my best and do my best, not because I realize that a lot of people expect a whole lot more from me than others, but because I expect that of myself, and because I want to make sure that the product you receive from me is the best product possible, because my clients deserve that and nothing less.
Thank you for this compelling discussion. Now we welcome 2 members of the audience to ask any panelist a question. Bella.
Is this my microphone? All right, so,
We can use our voices. Let's just elevate.
you
can just elevate.
okay, so I thank you so much, everyone, for your experiences. I think it means so much to us to actually hear how you overcame obstacles and how we might face those obstacles in the future. What I want to ask is, it's so admirable to see how comfortable you all are in your skins. And I know that that's not a given, but that was something that you worked on. How did you deal with the feeling that you ever had to censor yourself in some way? Because it seems like when you're in a position of power and you are a minority, you have to censor yourself less. But as students and law students, we might have to face situations where we will have to censor ourselves for our careers or our reputation. So how do you balance that and not feel like you're compromising your morals?
As judges, I mean, we're not able to, I think it's probably a question that can be better answered by lawyers, because we can't really have positions that would impact a case that's before us. But I think most importantly, it's important to just be true to who you are. And if you have an opinion, you don't always have to express it, as long as you know who you are and you have people around you who you can be confidentially, open with. So I think as law students, so you should think about your future when you post things, because if you're a little bit too expressive, you might be impacting future employment by having an idea that might be controversial. So I think that you have to balance what you want for your future with your need to kind of express yourself and who you are. And it's individual. It's something that you have to figure out for yourself. But as students, you obviously want jobs. So it's important to be careful in that endeavor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for asking such a great question. Now we will take a brief intermission, but don't go anywhere because we have a special guest tonight. Her name is Doralis Allen, and she is a spoken word artist on behalf of Phenomenal Voices student group at SUNY Albany. She will perform a spoken word poem that is inspired by her Guatemalan and African American heritage. Please help me welcome Doralis Allen. Nice to meet you.
All right. This is something I wrote. I called it Meet the Parents. Yeah. All right. From the concrete of Guatemala, she rose, a bucket of water to wash her own. She's bloomed for what we presume to be the depths of poverty. Soul and 80s baby facing the repercussions of guerrilla insurgency. America's urgency outside borders, though amongst contained epidemics of drugs and incarceration, a capitalistic splurge. You see how she runs you down and leaves you to deal with the aftermath. Death, homelessness, and increase of violence so vast. Take a vacation and through first class windows, you look past consequences. Had immigrants fleeing. Amelia Hernandez, one amongst the masses, her mother watching over my mother's from the skies, no hospital nearby on the day of her birth. It was an hour to survive as her son ran for an ambulance, screaming she's arrived. Flew across borders, 13 in Queen's eyes winking, because little do she know the man that will come later into her life with the heritage of kidnapped kings and queens. Stolen religion and last names, they were afraid of the wings, and through rhythm and blues, their legacies gifted strength against white supremacy. We freed ourselves. I wonder if new Malcolm X will put an X on that scalp, multiply each white lie by every Black and brown soul that died. Rest in power to our Black Panther chapters. We aspire that it's soon to be new ones, written in textbooks with our history corrected, not only with explanations for our heritage, but explanations as to how they are one and the same. Labels they place to devise our cause, leading to separation by hues of skin tone and alphabets of curl pattern at what cost? Abused and victimized histories, we owe it to our ancestors and our legacies to uplift future generations. I'm sorry, I'm gonna run it back. All right. Abused and victimized histories, we owe it to our ancestors and legacies to uplift for future generations. A sense of pride that these systems attempt to hold us down. It shows fear of our strength. Misplaced brothers and sisters, orphaned into unkempt foster homes in order to disorganize and dismantle the power gifted in melanin. It's time to pay back our relatives with actions towards our sentiments. May they rest in heaven. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doralis. That was so awesome. Very powerful indeed. All right, we will move on to our next question.
The next question will be for Professor of Law, Ciji Dodds. The question is, our layered question is, the Commerce Clause embodies the history of enslaved African Americans being auctioned and sold through interstate commerce as chattel. Contemporary constitutional law classes are hesitant to address this history. Is it important to address this history in constitutional law class? Why or why not?
I would like to thank you for such an easy question.
That's easy.
I was being sarcastic. Are any of my con law students in here? Because I'm praying you're not having like a flashback to the midterm because this was question 2. Okay. So yes, it is important. And it's important for a variety of reasons. So first and foremost, the premise that I'm speaking upon is that to ignore the perpetual propertization of Blackness and consequently slave capitalism as the foundation of American commerce is to ignore the Constitution. We think of us, of America as having a constitution, but the reality of the situation is that we have 2 constitutions. We have one constitution that was pre-abolition, the Reconstruction Amendment, starting with 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, which is referred to as a constitution of compromise. The compromise being a compromise between genocide and brutalization and oppression for a union that is based on a new aristocracy. That's sort of cloaked in this idea that we're doing, well, not we, because I wasn't in the we, but people were doing something new. They were doing something brave. They were working towards life, liberty, and property. But the reality of the situation is their life, their liberty, and their property was contingent upon the perpetual propertization of Blackness. And then we have the second constitution, which is what most of us think of as the Constitution. But if we were to actually look at the development of our country, starting with the Declaration of Independence and the charges against King George, one of those charges was related specifically to inciting slave insurrections. Then if we look at the end of the Constitution, where of course the United States affirmatively declares itself as a state, well, one of the constitutive elements required in order to acquire international statehood was financial viability. And surprise, surprise, that financial viability was based on slave capitalism. And so then when we go to that constitution of compromise, the compromise was, in order for the nation to exist, slave capitalism must be protected by the terms and provisions of the Constitution. So that's how we end up with the 3/5 compromise. It's how we end up with the prohibition against ending the slave trade before 1808. That's how we end up with the fugitive slave clause. And then in the midst of all that, we have slave capitalism, which is how we ended up with the constitutional compromise. We have slave capitalism as the dominant source of profit in the United States. And oftentimes when we think about it in terms of commerce and in constitutional law, we think about it in terms of the Commerce Clause, interstate commerce. The reality of the situation is that it was not only interstate commerce, and just so that we're clear, the trafficking of enslaved people was the dominant form of interstate commerce for a substantial period of our history. This was international commerce. Again, going back to the idea that it was a constitutive element of our ability to be viable as a nation. It was the way that we engage in international markets. It was the way in which we actually acquired economic dominance through slavery in the Caribbean. It is the reason why this country has consistently oppressed Haiti, because of the fact that they dared to take their freedom and to burn everything to the ground. And so that commerce, that system of commerce, the perpetual propertization of Blackness is the essential most, and this is what I'm positing, the essential most element of our nation, the essential most element of our Constitution. And I do not think that you can teach constitutional law without teaching chattelhood and the impact that it has had on commerce. I think that is educational malpractice, just so that I'm very clear on my position with that. And when you look at actual constitutional law, it was so essential to where that, if we were to look at Groves v. Slaughter, which was a case that specifically addressed whether or not Congress has the power to regulate commerce, which you know it does, it's an enumerated power in the Constitution, but with respect to slave trafficking, the court punted. Of all the decisions where there have been these affirmative statements regarding Congress's commerce power to regulate interstate commerce, this was the one area in which the court punted because slave capitalism was so important. So how do you teach the commerce power without teaching slave capitalism? And then fast forward to the second constitution, it didn't end there because we have the 13th Amendment with its carve out, where essentially carceral capitalism supplanted slave capitalism. And then there we also have a form of, and you see it especially now, treating Black bodies as items of commerce in a system of carceral capitalism, where by virtue of the prison industrial complex, there is an actual financial vested interest in trafficking of human beings based on crimes real and imagined. And I say imagined because sometimes crimes are imagined, and just because you don't have the resources to defend yourself, those imagined crimes become reality and you are punished accordingly. And so I don't think there is any way to teach constitutional law, just like there's no way to teach property law without teaching the degree to which Blackness, Black bodies have been consistently and continue to be exploited as items of commerce in our economic system. And when I say continue to be, in a variety of ways, even in looking at a lot of times in constitutional law, we think it ends with the cases, okay, abolition over, okay, Plessy, the end. But if you were to look at Slaughterhouse, if you were to look at Lochner, these sort of concepts of economic liberty continue the process of some form of treating Black bodies as items of commerce. You know, what is economic liberty when you're told you have freedom of contract, but that freedom of contract is either being arrested as a vagrant and leased out as a convict, or forced into a system of sharecropping, which is just another form of slavery, where the propertization of your body results in the fact that you are making profit for someone else and you will never escape the system, and therefore you are still a slave. So still an item of commerce in a different form of a capitalistic system. And so we have to teach it in order to be responsible educators. And, you know, going back to Professor Farley's statement, as a graduate of the Howard University School of Law, is either a social engineer or a parasite upon society. And I take that very seriously. And that is why I have the perspective that I have on constitutional law. And it's why I love constitutional law, for that reason.
Thank you so much, Professor Dodds. The next question, or I apologize, would anyone like to respond? Any panelists would like to respond or add to what Professor Dodds just said? Okay, we will move on to the next question. The next question is for Brenda Baddam. The question is, what challenges do you face as an attorney of color, and how do you confront and overcome these challenges?
So I really wish I wasn't after. If you don't mind, I'm gonna stand up because these chairs were made for skinny people and I have Latina thighs. So thank you for having me. Thank you for the time. I'm blown away by your answer.
Oh,
by the way,
thank
you are fantastic and amazing in all the works. I think that there are two types. There are two things that we see all the time. There's blatant racism, right? George Floyd, blatant racism. And then there's microaggressions, things that are there. We pick up on them, but they're not so in your face, right? Like a judge, after being reminded of how you say your name, not saying your name correctly, right? being on jury duty and being asked if you have children only if you say you're married, but not if you're single. Microaggressions, right? And we face those all the time, whether you like to see it or not. Each one of us has faced a microaggression. I was just on trial 3 weeks ago. This federal civil judge, I probably introduced myself like 16 times. Every time a witness came up, my name is Brenda Baddam. I know I have an accent. If you don't understand me, please let me know. He called me Brenda Badman continuously until my co-counsel, who is a white man, had to tell him something. So these are microaggressions that everyone faces, not just me, and I'm sure there are levels of microaggressions that everyone faces at different levels, right? How someone approaches these is very different for everyone. Whether you decide to be very outspoken, that's on you. I personally wear my hoops all the time. I don't have them now because my ears hurt, but I wear hoops. Thank you. I wear hoops all the time. I was so impressed with how Brenda said Fermin's name, because you don't get that enunciation all the time. But those are things as a Latina woman, I am so excited to see, right? So how you deal with these, how you go about dealing with these, it really is individual. But if you decide to deal with them, then stand in your power, right? Be truthful to who you are. If you want to wear what makes you happy, do so. Within the construct that it is professional. I just rebutted my mic. I will also say, Judge, I'm promoting you, but Professor Farley. Professor Farley said something that is so important and so real, and I think it needs to be said again. Professor Farley said that this system was not made for people of color. And I could not agree with that more. I think you are absolutely 100% spot on. For example, and I'll give you 3 examples in 3 different fields and then I'll sit down. COVID, all right? When you went to go get your COVID vaccines, you had to sign paperwork or you had to meet with somebody who had paperwork for you, right? Did you know in Albany County, those paperwork, those forms did not come in Spanish or in fact, any other language. So Capital District Latinos had to translate them for you, a nonprofit organization. 2, when you get arrested by an officer roadside, and I know you guys have seen those roadside tests that they do when they think you're drunk. How is a white English-speaking man going to translate that to an immigrant or a non-English speaking person when we are a sanctuary city? We take them all in. 3. And I wrote this one down because I got excited. Sorry, guys. All right, orders of protection, right? You have an order of protection. It tells you to stay away from this person. If you don't follow it, you're getting arrested again. Have you ever seen an order of protection in Creole? Have you seen an order of protection in Swahili? Yet we are mandating that people follow these laws, follow these statutes, follow all these things, yet we don't accommodate for everyone. So yes, there are microaggressions and there is blatant racism, and thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Brenda. Would any panelists like to respond?
I'd like to add something.
Go ahead, Judge Flores.
Thank you. I appreciate Ms. Baddam's comments. And aside from agreeing that there are certain microaggressions that we will face to varying degrees, I'll make a plug for the law, right? As we get in different positions of power within the law, please keep in mind, law students, that the judges in this room are the ones that make the decision about whether or not there's informed consent, whether or not there was knowledge, actual knowledge about orders, such as the ones that Ms. Baddam has mentioned. So, you know, it's gratifying. You know, I'm not here to create any particular outcome as a judge, but there have been many moments in my 7 years on the bench where I thought to myself, you know what? I think my background had a lot to do with how I ruled on issues such as the ones that Ms. Baddam raised. You know, there's hope, and you know, these are real issues. So I just want to share that perspective as well.
Thank you so much, Judge Flores. Yes, go ahead.
Or no?
You can talk without
Okay.
holding the button.
The only thing I really want to add is that I'll never forget in my law school graduation, our dean standing up there and saying to us, for all of us to remember that we're walking away with some tremendous power. And we get to choose what we want to do with that power, whether it be good or bad. So the only thing I wanted to add was that when you're thinking about how are you going to face these challenges, whether you're going to be super aggressive about it or let this one slide, or maybe next time I'll deal with it, always remember you're one of the very few people of color who have that ESQJD title. Always remember that, because you're not speaking up in the moment about an unpopular situation. You're speaking on behalf of everyone else who doesn't have that ESQJD. So it's often, at least I personally think, an internal battle of what are you going to do, right? Are you going to face the challenge head on? Are you going to face it in a more classy way, maybe via motion or through an ombudsman office? Are you going to face it with just winning your case, right? Just this week, I won without providing testimony. I got father increased unsupervised visits during a child welfare case, and I didn't give 1 ounce of testimony. I wrote a very basic motion, submitted all my supporting evidence. DCF was ready and prepared, social workers ready and prepared to challenge every single moment of it. The judge looked at everything, looked at us and said, this is ridiculous. I'm not taking testimony. Here's my decision. So sometimes you can win battles silently, but sometimes you do have to sit in the room and remember that you have that ESQ at the end of your name. And there's a lot of little people counting on you. When I say little, I'm talking about children. There's a lot of people just like you, 10, 15 years younger than you, counting on you, because you don't know if you're going to be that social educator, if you are going to be part of the parasite, right? So what you do today might affect people 20 years from now. So just always keep that in the back of your mind.
Now we would like to welcome 2 members of the audience to ask any member of the panel a question. Sure, yeah.
Project if you can.
My question is for Professor Dodds. So this might seem completely unrelated at first, but I promise it. So today is the anniversary of when Margaret Thatcher died, and in the wake of that, a lot of people throughout the UK were pointing out that while she was the first female prime minister of the United Kingdom, she did not do much to help people in the United Kingdom. And I've noticed that there's something similar to that happening in the United States, where particularly politicians will stress that representation alone will act as a solution to a problem, even if said the person who's representing their community actively goes against the well-being of said community. Like some examples of this would be Wilson Coon, the first Black American the current mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, a Black man actively pursuing policies that are extremely harmful to both New York City's homeless population as well as its African American population by strengthening police powers. And we're also seeing it with people at the federal level, be it former President Obama failing to take inclusive action on police brutality, and current Vice President Kamala Harris during her tenure as Attorney General of California also instituting policies which harm various communities of personal. So then I guess my question, so I'm sorry about the lengthy preamble, is that how can that perception of representation alone being the solution to these like very fundamental problems be defeated in framework to shift or the ideological framework to shift to recognizing that you need people who can actually provide concrete solutions to these people who will advocate for things like abolition instead of just.
So is your question, how do we get away from the idea that representation alone is sufficient to effectuate change?
I'm sorry that I cannot condense that.
It's okay. I do this for a living. I take student questions and I condense them. So that is a tough question. And what I view it as, and this has just been my experience, is this is along the same lines of the propertization of Blackness, the propertization of brownness, is that tokenization is another form of propertization. And it's the idea that you are representative as a piece of property to fulfill a certain purpose. And so when individuals are placed in certain positions, the idea is that you will fulfill, like I said, a certain purpose. And what it does is it divests the individual of any sense of personhood. And I think as people, we need to recognize that no one, and this is going to sound very harsh, no one is required to bear a certain albatross of race. People exist to fulfill whatever their mission is in life. And we can't just think that by virtue of just existing, someone is required to function as our form of property to absolve us of any feelings of guilt. And I don't know how we change that other than just accepting that people are people and not expecting everyone to pass this sort of purity test just because they are in some position of being some representative. Yes, it's important. Representation is important. But people can choose to do whatever they want to do when in whatever positions that they are in. And I don't think it's incumbent upon us to say, okay, well, how do we solve this problem of those people who we're saying are representatives and the fact that they're not effectuating change? I don't think that's a problem for us to solve. I think the real issue is what are we going to do as individuals, irrespective of those people who are in those positions, because those are just individual people. Of course, they're a part of the whole, but I think it's a strange thing to look at those individual people as solving the problem. And I think that's just indicative of certain people who have this mindset of, okay, I have a token, now problem solved. Is it when we have discussions about diversity, oh, we have diverse students, problem solved. That's part of it, but that's not the entirety of the puzzle. Everything has to work together. And I just think it is fundamentally flawed to expect people to operate as puppets to solve our problems of oppression. That's not what they're there for.
I want to add too that I think the other side is that representation allows people to feel like there's hope for the future. So when I was running, I was really fearful because no one had ever been selected to run for Supreme Court who was a person of color. So I didn't know if it was possible. We had met with certain PR companies who said, we have to talk about the issue. And I said, well, what's the issue? And then they said, well, you're Black and we don't know if you can win this race. So for me to do it, I was to sit down with people who didn't have a belief in me because it hadn't happened before. You know, that was really difficult. I had to spend a lot of my family's money to run for office when I knew that it was something that had never been done before. But now that I've won and I've done it, I know there's people who can look and say, that can be done. And they don't have to ask that question next time there's an issue, because they can say, well, Christina Ryba won, so why can't I win? So maybe I'm not doing everything that every person in a certain community might think that I should do, but I'm here, and that means a lot. So I think that's important for you to recognize.
Really love what my co-panelists have said. And I just want to simply add to that. Often we think that that one person in and of themselves and by themselves can actually bring about the change that even they might want to bring about. When we consider the confirmation of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson, and she only got 3 votes from the Republican Party, only 3, right? So it doesn't matter that you're there and this is what you want to do. Sometimes you can't get there because there are other people that need to come on board. You know, the civil rights movement was fought, and it wasn't just people of color who fought in that. So sometimes it's others, right? I shared this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. that, and I'm paraphrasing because I haven't memorized it, but sometimes we have to pay for the sins of those who remain silent, right? It's those people who don't approve of what they see, but will not do a thing about it or will not help those that are trying. But the president was just one person. And he had to deal with Congress. He had to deal with Congress. And really, do I need to say any more? So all those people who say he did not do what he should have done for our communities are not thinking he had to deal with Congress. And he tried. There were executive orders that he issued to try to address certain things, but it wasn't just him. And I've been meaning to say this, which is sort of off topic, but I have to say it. Professor Farley, I had a great 5th grade. Actually, my 5th grade teacher, who happened to be African-American, was the one who taught me and everybody else in my class and all of her 5th grade classes how to ice skate, which in the South Bronx was not something that was. But to your point, right, it takes more than just that one person. But I agree that we feel the pressure. I feel the pressure all the time as being the only Latino judge in this area, in the 3rd Judicial District, that people might be looking at me for a certain thing, might be expecting a certain thing. I presided over the youth park here in Albany County, where about 95% of the young people are African-American and 95% of those 95 are males. And here I am, right? Looking just like them in a system that our own Chief Justice has acknowledged has systemic racism within it. And here I am, a judge within that system, but I'm just one person. And I agree with Justice Ryba. Me being there will encourage other people to also try. Because the more of us there are who want to try to effectuate some change, the better the easier it'll be for us to get there.
One last thing, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry. You are absolutely correct. To put the expectation on one person absolves everyone else from their duties.
Thank you so much. I also just want to add, and I cannot also memorize the quote, especially in Spanish, but it goes along the lines, as 1st generation students of color, our parents, sometimes because of language barriers, because of fear, they shut down and they cannot project their own voices. And so as students of color, as 1st generation students, we have to sort of project for them because they're fearful that they could be deported, that they could be incarcerated. And so that is why representation matters, especially in the legal field. And so I forgot how it goes in Spanish, but it's just very important to have this representation, not only for our parents, but for our community who has the fear to stand up for themselves.
Our next special guest is Jordan Taylor Hill. Jordan is a leading African drumming and dance professional in the Capital Region. His performance is inspired by themes of healing and freedom. Please help me welcome Jordan Taylor Hill.
Homicides unfold, before it's time, yet I've been alone. Still I roam from time to time, my mind wanders to some chips that sell, some kids they fail. Souls go for sale, but my mind wanders. do that, y'all can clap twice too. Yeah? I change it a little bit. Yes, we're gonna keep that 2 claps, yeah? I wanted to do an original piece there. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves, hands up, baby, through it. Yeah, I'm gonna try it one more time. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves, hands up, and strings, trees. See, I want to be free. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves. That's blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves. Oh, no, no, oh no. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves. Hands up, and strangers to the tree. See, I want to be free. Blood on the leaves, blood on the leaves. Give it up for Gianni. We pulled through 24 hours notice, actually less than 24 hours. He's a super talented artist in his own right, so thank you for coming to the piece. Yeah? One more song we're going to do real quick, or dance that. This one is called Soul Music. So we're playing music. A lot of my influences come from West Africa. A lot of it from Guinea, a lot of it from Senegal, some from American so I love their culture. Also love Black American culture. I'm African American, so I'm influenced by hip hop and just that idea of tradition and that right, as well as learning other traditional music. Dance classes Saturdays at Albany Barn and Mondays at Albany Barn, and yeah, if you're interested. More information, I'll stick around for a bit. Some potential law students or potential some lawyers coming in there. Yeah? So this next one's called Soul Music. Oh, is that it? Check. Yeah, give it up for Gianni one more time. Around for the section a little bit too, and maybe invite some folks if they want to, learn a rhythm. If you learn some steps, y'all are more than welcome. I think it'd be great. So give it up for yourselves. How about that? Huh?
Thank you so much, Jordan. That was so awesome. All right, so we are going to continue.
Now we will resume our panel discussion. The next question will be for Gabriella Romero. The question is, what are some of the ways that we might navigate being underestimated as the first or the only Black and Afro-Latinx professional in the legal field on mental, physical, and spiritual levels?
Thank you for this question, and thank you guys for having me for the panelists. This has been such a great discussion so far, so it feels cool to be a part of this group. So I personally am the only Latina in the Public Defender's Office, and I am the first and only Latina to represent the 6th Ward in the city of Albany. Personally, I've been underestimated all the time. I imagine that many people here have also been underestimated. It's a matter of what do you do when someone underestimates you. Most notably, in my Common Council race, I was underestimated at every single moment. I was told, you will not win this. You have no political experience, which was true. You are not involved with the organizational Democratic Party. I wasn't involved in, for anyone that knows anything about City of Albany politics, I wasn't involved in the neighborhood associations, which is a group of, at least in the 6th Ward, wealthy, home-owning people that are involved in their community. And they said, you're not involved in this group. You're not involved in all of these groups. You're not going to win this. And that was literally told to my face multiple times. And in those moments, you have to decide, some of that might be true, but are you going to allow those statements to like sit and internalize within yourself, or are you going to do something about it? And for me, it was in the beginning, me and my mom with a fold up plastic table in front of my 1-bedroom apartment on Madison Ave with a massive plate of flan, being like, hi, I'm running for office. Will you sign my petition? It kind of went from there. But the point, though, is that it started like that. And then we decided we're going to outwork everyone. And every single day, the minute I come back from work, I'm going to be working until the sun goes down, and I'll be knocking on every single door in the ward. And they underestimated me because we received way too many signatures, over I think 4 times the regular amount. And then after that moment, we continued with that same level of energy, bringing in volunteers and momentum to the campaign, where people were like, we see you too much. There was actually posts in these neighborhood forums saying, these people are really annoying and they keep knocking on my door and like, can they please stop? Like, please, I'm voting. And we're like, well, we're not gonna come, we're coming back until you tell us you're voting for us, which was good. And I say that because how do you deal with being underestimated? I think you work as hard as you freaking can, and you continue to do that. And in the courtroom, I'm a public defender in my day job, which means that I defend people that can't afford an attorney in their misdemeanor and felony criminal cases. I mostly do felonies now, but I originally started with just misdemeanor cases. And so when I first started, I felt, maybe as many young lawyers do, that I'm being underestimated, that people are thinking you're new, you don't know what you're talking about. And I was new. And maybe for the first little bit, I didn't know what I was talking about, but I immediately took on as many second seat opportunities that I could. I really took the time, and this is maybe a conversation for another day about being a public defender, but I really took the time to understand all of my cases, asking questions of my clients, understanding the case to a full and intense extent, so that when I arrive in court, whether it's representing someone at just like an appearance in local court, if I'm representing someone at a hearing in county court, that I know that I'm prepared. That I know that you might be underestimating me, but I know that I'm confident that I have done the work to get me to where I am and that I can win this case where I need to be at that moment. So the last part of it is navigating how to handle being underestimated as the first or the only. And I think I touched on my strongest answer to that, which is working really freaking hard. And I think that that's consistent among any field, personally coming from the criminal sphere. But there's a few other things too that I think people touched on that is a way to navigate being the first or the only, not maybe necessarily being underestimated. And Brenda touched on it really well, and it's navigating the ability to stand up for yourself during these microaggressions or blatant racism, or even internal office blunders. Personally, people say, if I get really passionate in court, I've been known to like shed a tear. Okay, I'll admit it. And people will be like, oh, that's the Latina in you. And I'm like, that's damn right. It's the Latina in you. And don't you freaking underestimate it. Right? Like, and to a certain extent, maybe that is a microaggression, because if a white person was being passionate, they'd be like, good job. You're such a great lawyer. And so if it gets to a point that's inappropriate, it's having that confidence to say, you know what? I'm addressing this, and you're right, that is the Latina in me, or excuse me, that was inappropriate. And developing that confidence definitely takes time, because when I first started in my practice, it was hard to acknowledge that, because you're a young attorney, you're in court, the judge is saying things. But with time, you navigate those the first or the only experiences by having that confidence. Something else that I wanted to touch on is surrounding yourself with a really positive support system. And I, of my own fault, maybe I didn't engage in classroom activity as much at Albany Law School, but I found a lot of support in my extracurricular activities. So it actually, my mentor in law school was Brenda Baddam, right next to who.
Mine was Judge Rivera.
I know how that works out. We're all here. And so, it was for me, finding people that I identified with that were doing the work that I wanted to do, and then following them and being annoying. So for me, it was Brenda in law school. In my political career, it was reaching out to Barbara Smith and saying, you're awesome. What are you doing? Because I want to continue doing what you're doing. And then, at that same time, kind of flipping the coin, finding ways to give back. And my mentee's here too. Nai is over there. Hi. So it's like finding additional opportunities to say, hey, you like asked me that question about law school. Do you want to like talk more about what you're planning on doing in law school? Or like, do you even want to go to law school? Let's talk about it. Just having those conversations with people, I think, is really important and exciting as both an elected and an attorney. And I know that I'm like kind of going outside of my time, but there was something that we that was touched upon in a last question or two, which was the difference between tokenism and Judge Ryba said, being a hope for others. And I think sometimes as a Latina in the public defender's office, many of my clients are people of color. And as a Latina, I feel and the only Latina in the public defender's office, it's a weird thing that you have to navigate, being like, I am the only Latina here, but I'm also so happy to be a Latina in this space because otherwise it would be a lot of white people. And that's just something that you navigate is the difference, because the Professor Dodds and Judge Ryba both have similar but potentially different takes on that. And that is something that I think we all have to balance as attorneys in this space, how to balance that and come to terms with it. And I don't have an answer, but I'm just acknowledging that that's something that we deal with too. So thanks.
I just want to clarify. I think there's a difference between tokenization and representation. What I was responding to was a question in which you said people who treat representation as the end all be all.
Right.
And so I was
right.
saying people who do that are tokenizing people because they're treating those people like their property to perform for them.
Right.
So I just want to clarify
Sorry.
that's the difference
Yeah.
between tokenization and representation.
Yeah, I think just in general, the concept of tokenization, which you touched on, I think is what I meant by that. Yeah. But yeah, it's something we all navigate. But it's so wonderful to have these conversations, to know that there are other people that are both not struggling, but that are going through these conflicts, and that we are together kind of as Latinas, as people of color, and as attorneys.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. Our next question will be for Professor Mendez. The question is, what insight can you offer to lawyers of color that feel they have to compromise honoring their authentic self in the legal profession to ensure their reputation is protected?
So I hope not to make this seem too simple, but it's really a matter of being deliberately tenacious, because throughout your entire career, whether it be your educational career, your professional career, you're going to be made to feel unwanted and unwelcome in the space. I'll start off with a little story early in my career. I won't name names, but before I started at one of my first legal jobs, I received an email, HR email. Getting towards the point I'm talking about earlier. Received an HR email that said, "Hey, for your company picture, be sure to wear a shirt and jacket that doesn't blend in with your skin tone." All right, sounds innocent enough. I look over, I see a parenthetical. I said, "This can't go up." Parenthetical said, "like peach or pink." And so again, I make sure the email is, okay, this is so-and-so at, company.com. All right. Okay, it's to me. It's July, so I'm looking, all right. I know I was in Michigan at the time, but I didn't, my melanin didn't fade that much. And so I was put on high alert, giant red flag. Okay, can I be who I am? This space isn't meant for me. Not at all. They couldn't even handle a simple picture email. It becomes so difficult in every single space. You're told you shouldn't be here. We don't want you here. I'm looking at I occupy a weird space in that I'm in corporate, right? I love it. I love business. I love helping founders of color and people in communities of color raise money. But I'm looking at the statistics I shared with my class a few weeks ago. Venture capital, over $1 trillion raised. Less than 1.3% went to LatinX companies, right? Again, over 1 trillion raised. Less than 2% went to companies run by Black founders, okay? Disgusting. So, my advice is take what's yours, folks, of course, being professional, but sometimes professionalism be damned. Of course, being strategic, being deliberate, because regardless of how professional you are, sometimes they're still going to make you feel unwelcome. So take what's yours.
Thank you, Professor Mendez.
To add to that. So I just think it's also important when you're moving your way up to have your eye on the prize and just think about what it is do you really want at the end of the day. So if you don't have to, I don't think every little issue has to be addressed every single time. I think you have to really balance that out, because at the end of the day, you want to be at the table to make change. So you have to figure out how to get there. And sometimes you have to be strategic about when you're going to make a statement about something. So it's something that you have to figure out by being a chess player, and figure out when it makes sense to be the person who's going to make an issue about something that might not be huge. So you just have to really balance out what it is you want at the end of the day and try your best to get there.
Thank you. The next and final question will be for Professor Rodriguez. The question is, civil rights attorneys establish critical race theory to examine historical racism that is embedded into legal doctrines and the ways that legal doctrines perpetuate racial inequities in our modern legal system. Many legal professionals believe that critical race theory should be taught separate from legal education. If legal professionals do not understand oppression that is rooted in our country's legal history, what are some of the ways that we can still work to impactfully create equity in the legal field?
So the most simple answer, I have a complicated answer and I have a simple answer. The simple answer is just be kind. Like somewhere between kindergarten and being a legal professional, we lose that concept of showing our peers kindness, working towards kindness, and just exemplifying some really moral ground that we were raised in, right? Somewhere along that line, we lose that. From 2016 to 2020, I think everybody in this room knows how nasty things got and disrespectful things got, not just in the legal community, but out in our own personal communities, right? So my simple answer is kindness matters. My most complicated answer is that we have to remember, so if you're in this room, oppressive groups and the concepts of oppression you understand, or at least think it's important enough because you're here, right? So my answer is more about those individuals who are not here today. My answer is towards them, because most of them will not sign up for the CLE that deals with these concepts, right? They won't accept your invite to come here tonight, and they're gonna get free tacos in a little while anyways. You know, they're not here, they're not present. They don't wanna ask questions in the lawyer's lounge while we're all, you know, they might like my blazer right now, but they're too conservative to ask me where I got that, right? They just don't want to engage in that cultural concepts. They don't want to know more about me. They don't want to know more about what I did this weekend. When it comes to our clients, for example, I say this all the time, you know, I don't have, you know, some superpower wands that all of a sudden every immigrant and Spanish speaking person gravitates to me. I don't. But my peers were asking me, you know, what is it that you're offering? What kind of services are you offering? And I'm telling them nothing more than just my genuine conversations with them about their legal matter. How can I help you? What is it, the concerns you have? My sincere counseling to them is what most people want to hear and what most people want to see. Our peers who are not here and that don't understand oppression or have never experienced oppression just aren't educated enough to understand that and acknowledge that with their clients, right? So those individuals need to really seek peers like everybody that's on here and make that extra effort. I've always said that every law office should be representative of what your community, what your client is. So if you are a public defender, if you do criminal law and most of your clients are brown, then I hope you have paralegals, interns, secretaries, co-counsels who are also brown, right? Because they're going to be your best teacher. They're going to be your best critic. The popular thing we like to do now is have a diversity and inclusive liaison, right? But you won't see private legal offices having that. You'll see these major corporate firms having it. These smaller law offices won't really think that that's that important to have. Like, do we really need that, right? I was a diversity and inclusion liaison for the upstate New York chapter for AILA, American Immigration Lawyers Association. And for the past 18 months, I had tried every effort to get individuals engaged. And we're talking about a lot of attorneys in upstate New York who practice immigration law with the most diverse population we have in upstate New York. And the attendance was from 1 meetings to 1 to 2, maybe 10 at most, right? So it's those individuals that really need to lean on others who, I think if you asked anybody on here, we'd want to give you some advice. We'd want to help you. We'd go out for lunch with you and have those type of conversations, but they're uncomfortable conversations, right? But they're necessary. The only other thing I have on here is that we're also, there's an office attorney and then there's a courtroom attorney. You're going to learn that we learn to have different personalities, what environment we're in, right? So when we talk about, you have to pick your battles. Being an attorney is very much like being married. You're not going to fight about everything. So those of you who are married in here know exactly what I'm talking about. You have to pick your battles and pick your delivery. So from 2016 to 2020, I don't want to believe that people are not kind. I want to believe that people's delivery was not an execution to some type of effective way of communication. So my best suggestion for people who are not here and don't understand oppression is to look for your peers in the courtroom, have that delivery. If you see the only brown person in the courtroom who's new and walked in, has never been here before, maybe an attorney, and you are the individual, well, just say it, you're the white individual in the courtroom, introduce yourself, invite them to meet everyone else who's already part of the bar, or invite them to meet the judge if you can, the clerk. I'll never forget my first time in juvenile court in Pittsfield. The chief clerk came out to get me, and the chief clerk never leaves her office, purposely walked and followed me into the courtroom to identify me both with my ID and my bar card. And I look just like this. I haven't changed much from 11 years ago. So just very embarrassing, right? But you're new, are you gonna say anything? There was a nice white woman near me and saw what happened. And she asked me, who is that? Did she really just ID you? And I said, yeah. And she made a big deal about it for me, right? She took the leadership and told our other peers that were in the room, like, look what this person just said, that's not right. And she stood up for me. She showed kindness to me. And I'll never forget that. And if she continues, and which I'm sure she will be, the continued kind person that she is, that's the kind of person we want and need in the legal field. That's how we change the legal field. Whether you're very educated in oppressive systems or not, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, if we all treat each other kind with respect, we can all move forward as a legal bar.
Thank you so much, Professor Rodriguez. Well, this concludes our panel discussion. We hope that it's insightful for everyone who participated and listened in on the imperative topics that we discussed tonight. Again, a special thanks to Judge Flores, who joined us tonight from California. And this was honestly such a powerful discussion. And this is exactly why we wanted to create this space for critical race theory and to also express how our identities play such a huge important role in the legal profession. And representation matters, of course. And I really hope that everyone enjoyed tonight's discussion. So I would like to now give our keynote speaker and each of our panelists a gift. as a symbol of our gratitude for the important work that you all do to improve our legal system and for your participation in our panel. So please join me in a round of applause for our panelists.